At 9:20 p.m., Miller was parking outside of Ray's bar. There were already 2 cop cars on the scene, with their red lights flashing. Over his radio, someone was shouting instructions. In the back seat, Tobias heard it all. Someone had been shot outside of a bar. Miraculously, he was still alive, and an ambulance had already swung by. Miller got out of the car, but Tobias stopped him. "Hey man, can I take a piss?" Tobias asked. "We've been driving for hours." "You're gonna have to hold it for a while longer. This is a crime scene," Miller answered before slamming his door closed. "Then let me piss in the goddamn bushes. Hello?" He watched through the window as Miller joined 4 other cops. One of the men pointed at a car that was missing its windshield, and then at a red spot in the gravel. Miller looked back at his cruiser, and the men did the same. Tobias relaxed into a seat to avoid their stares. Miller returned a few minutes later and put his car into gear. "Where are we going?" Tobias asked. "Crazy," Miller answered. "Was it the pen and needle dude? Is he still around here?" "We're looking for an emerald green station wagon, Mr. Stevens. If you can keep your eyes peeled, I'll make sure your holding cell is finally furnished," Miller said. "Promise me I'll have the cell to myself, and you have a deal," Tobias added. "Deal." Miller sped up the road. He noted the cold skid marks leading up the wrong side of the street and pointed them out to his passenger. "Listen, if you want me to concentrate, you have to let me take a piss," Tobias said from the back seat. "It's excruciating, man. Come on, just pull over somewhere." "You know that's illegal, right?" "Forget that you're a fucking cop for 1 second and show me some mercy." Miller eyed Tobias through the rearview mirror. "Do you realize a man was almost killed tonight? Does that matter at all to you?" "And I'm about to die. Does that matter at all to you?" "Tobias, you met this guy. You know how dangerous he can be. We can't waste any time." "Actually, he was pretty cool to me. I was the one that kind of fucked him over." "Only you, Tobias, could piss off a wanted murderer." "I'm about to wet my pants. I've been stuck in this car all day in handcuffs listening to your fucking music. I haven't asked you one thing besides pull over and let me." Miller swerved over to the shoulder and hit the brakes. Tobias hit his head against the cage separating the front and back seats. "Jesus!" he screamed. Miller got out and tore open Tobias's door. "Do it already!" Tobias stumbled out into the dark and disappeared amid the tall brush. "You better speed it up," Miller advised the air. He leaned against his hood and listened to Tobias piss into the grass. Something caught his eye. His headlights were pointed directly across the road, at the turnoff for the Tar Creek Park. He knew the place well. Often he took his family hiking up Deer Mountain to see the waterfall. That night there was a sign lying in the bushes. He jogged closer and saw that it was a yield sign. A car had come by and completely leveled it, most likely as it turned. Miller sprinted back to the car and yelled for Tobias to get in. "What's up?" Tobias asked. "God bless you, Stevens. You might have made the night." Tobias climbed into a seat and they accelerated away from the shoulder. "Where are we going?" "Into the park." Tobias shook his head. "The park? What park?" The emerald green station wagon was there, along with one other car, a car Miller did not recognize. It was a white convertible, and it was parked just as askew as the wagon. He got out of the car and inspected both vehicles. The wagon hadn't been driven in quite some time, but the convertible's engine was still popping from recent use. He ran back to his cruiser and got on the radio. "I'm going to need some backup at Tar Creek Park. Front entrance and the parking lot. I found our car," he said. 10 seconds after placing his radio back into the cradle, a male voice was responding, and then another. "What are you going to do?" Tobias asked. "I guess I'll go a little ways up the trail and keep my ears open," Miller answered. "Do you think it's him?" Miller responded by closing the door. "You're not going to leave me in here, are you? You can't just leave me here with a killer on the loose," Tobias cried, but Miller was already climbing the dirt path with his gun drawn. "This is bullshit!" Miller heard the shots, but they were so far away. Some seemed closer than others. He heard them all the same. He thought he could count 6 in all. He waited a few minutes and did not hear anything more. He had a flashlight on his belt, but he couldn't risk another party discovering his light. The best thing he could do was return to the parking lot and wait for the backup. So that is what he did, though very slowly. Every few steps he would crouch low and wait under a tree, his ears perked and his trigger finger ready. Then he would hike another minute or so and repeat his method. He couldn't hear a damn thing beside the wind in the trees and some lazy crickets. He decided to hurry. Further up the trail, he thought he could hear some loud breathing. He turned in mid-step and fell backward into a rock pile. He saw stars for a brief moment, and then realized that he was no longer carrying his gun. Desperately, he felt around him, tearing through the weeds and clods of dirt. The breathing was becoming more and more apparent. He could hear heavy footsteps like the hooves on a horse, and still his gun was nowhere to be found. He scrambled into the tall bushes, cutting open his hands and breaking the seams on his uniform. When the oncoming footsteps were too much to bear, he lay flat on his stomach and waited for them to pass. Inside his mind, he ran through all his options. He had a handheld taser on his belt and an unused can of pepper spray. Besides that, He had nothing to defend himself against a man with a loaded gun, so he hid in the bush by the side of the road, holding his breath and counting the seconds. The man passed through without even slowing. Miller could tell he was running, and relatively fast for such a steep trail so late at night. Miller prayed the cavalry was just pulling in. He hoped there was a gang of police cruisers waiting for the bastard, with 20 guns or more aimed at his chest. He wanted help. There was no way he could do this himself. Even after he knew the man was well beyond earshot, Miller remained in the bushes, listening to the crickets. His eyes were closed, and he was trying to listen to the loud voices of his comrades. He wanted to hear that everything was fine. Tom Griffith was in custody, or better yet, he was dead. He couldn't move. Every time he tried to crawl out of his little alcove, his muscles would tense and he would start to hyperventilate. Never before had he feared so much for his own life. Even with a gun, he didn't think he could stand up to the pin and needle killer. He heard gunshots from the parking lot. He could hear glass breaking and blood-curdling screams. Miller still couldn't move. He began to pray. The Count. Epilogue. Tom stepped off the path at exactly 10:30 p.m. and froze when he saw the police cruiser. He looked around and did a series of double takes. He tore Paul's car keys out of his pocket and made for the convertible. Then he noticed something moving inside the cop car, and he had to go in for a closer look. The movement wasn't from the driver's seat. It was coming from the back. He peered in through the glass and met Tobias Stevens for the second time. Tobias was huddled against the far window, staring at Tom with grave eyes. His hands were handcuffed and held up in front of his face, the fingers outsplayed. Everything about him was shaking. "I can't believe it," Tom said. His breath fogged over the window. "I don't believe it." He smiled and shot at the glass. Tobias screamed and Tom fired again. The second bullet lodged into Tobias's thigh, and the third blew a hole in the seat's upholstery. Tobias was kicking his legs against the door, and the chains to his handcuffs were clinking on the window above his head. "Why'd you do it?" Tom asked before aiming another shot. "You tell me why." A fourth bullet cleared out the other window and glass rained down over Tobias's hair. His screams were drowned out by the last gunshot, but by the time the clip was empty, Tobias was still alive. He was whimpering against his seat, his hands over his eyes. He wasn't kicking or yelling. He was submissive, and the ultimate sign of acceptance. Tom dropped the pistol and backed away from the police car. When there wasn't another gunshot, Tobias peeked out behind his fingers and watched Tom cross the parking lot. Tom jammed the keys into the convertible, but could not force himself to open the door. He fell over against the top of the cabin, trying frantically to keep his heels planted on the ground. "I made a mistake," he said. "I made a mistake." He collapsed into the driver's seat and hugged the steering wheel with both arms. He shut his eyes and gritted his teeth. Tears trickled down his cheeks and collected with his welling saliva. "God help me. I've made a mistake." The darkness ruptured with red lights, and somewhere Tom could hear a howl progressively gaining on him from the mouth of a determined but hungry beast.